I never thought I'd be that woman. You know the one. The woman who torches a 25-year marriage for a spark. The one who swaps a family home for a stranger's bed. But here I am, broke, alone in a crappy apartment that always smells faintly of curry from the flat below. My children barely speak to me anymore. My name is Alice. I'm 46 years old. And 3 years ago, I made what I believed was the bravest decision of my life. It turned out to be the dumbest mistake ever. David and I met in our 20s. He was a junior financial advisor, all earnest ambition and spreadsheets. I was working in the university admissions office, where I still work, though now I'm a senior administrator. Back then, he was this confident, steady guy with a laugh that could make my stomach ache in the best way. He had plans, a future all mapped out. I liked that. It felt safe. We were married after 2 years. Our first son, Jacob, arrived a year after that. And then, in a blur of diapers and school runs, came Emily and then Sam. Before I knew it, we had 3 children, a mortgage on a perfectly nice house in the Portland suburbs, and a life that looked exactly like the one we were supposed to want. But somewhere along the way, David changed. Or maybe I just started seeing him differently. After 25 years, our life was a routine etched in stone. He'd come home from the office. He'd eat the dinner I made. He'd watch television, usually sports or some political news channel. Then he'd go to bed, every single day. I felt like I was suffocating, quietly, politely. He stopped seeing me years ago. I know he did. I'd get a new haircut, something daring, with layers and highlights. I'd walk into the living room, feeling a little thrill of change. He wouldn't even look up from his phone. Not once. I'd buy a new dress, something that made me feel, well, something other than invisible. He'd glance at it, and his only question would be, how much did that cost? It wasn't an accusation. It was just logistics. Another number on a spreadsheet. That's what I'd become. A line item. Meanwhile, my friends were posting pictures on social media. Date nights. Surprise weekend getaways. A simple bouquet of flowers. Just because. And I'd look at my phone and feel this hollow ache deep in my chest. It's not that David was a bad man. He wasn't. He paid the bills, on time, every time. He never cheated, I'm almost certain of it. He showed up for the kids' school plays and soccer games, sitting dutifully in the stands. But is that really all a marriage is supposed to be? A well-managed business partnership? I started to dread coming home after work. The silence in our house was deafening. It felt like a museum of a life I didn't choose anymore. Or maybe, a life I had chosen, but had outgrown. All those family photos on the mantelpiece, they started to feel like they were mocking me. There we were, smiling at Disneyland, at Jacob's high school graduation, at Emily's prom, a happy family. But the woman in those pictures, she felt like someone else. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Not if you looked closely. And I started looking very, very closely. The kids were grown. They didn't need me hovering anymore. Jacob was 28, living his own life in Seattle. Emily was 26, engaged to a lovely young man and busy planning her wedding. And Sam, my baby, was 23 and finishing his last year of college. My job as a full-time mother was over. And David and I, we barely talked. Not about anything real. It was all logistics. Who's picking up the groceries this week? Did you remember to pay the electricity bill? The roof is leaking again. We need to call someone. Our conversations were a to-do list. There was no intimacy, no connection, just the shared administration of a life. And that's when I met Leo. He transferred to our department from the main campus downtown. He was the new marketing manager, brought in to refresh the university's recruitment strategy. And from the very first day, there was this energy, this current that flowed between us. He'd stop by my desk to ask questions he definitely knew the answers to. His eyes, a warm, deep brown, would hold mine just a second too long. He'd bring me coffee in the morning without asking, and he remembered exactly how I liked it after I told him just once. Cream, no sugar. David didn't even know if I drank coffee or tea in the mornings. We started having lunch together in the campus cafeteria, and for the first time in forever, someone was actually listening to me. Leo would look at me when I talked. He wouldn't glance at his watch or check his phone for stock market updates like David always did. He'd lean in, ask follow-up questions. He was interested in my thoughts. In me. I told myself we were just friends, colleagues. But deep down, in that quiet, honest place you only visit late at night, I knew it was more. Leo made me feel alive again. He made me feel desirable, interesting, worth paying attention to. He'd text me during the day, a funny meme that reminded him of a joke I'd made, a quick message asking how my big meeting went. Thinking of you, one said simply. When was the last time David had thought of me in the middle of a Tuesday? I honestly couldn't remember. I started making more of an effort with my appearance. I bought new clothes, things that weren't just practical and comfortable. I got my hair done regularly. I even lost those stubborn 15 pounds I'd been complaining about for years. It felt effortless, suddenly. David barely noticed. He just commented once that the credit card bill was higher than usual. But Leo noticed everything. He'd compliment my earrings. He'd tell me my hair looked pretty when I wore it down. Simple things. Things that shouldn't have meant so much, but they did. They were drops of water on a parched, barren land. I was so starved for that kind of attention. I started making excuses to work late, just so Leo and I could talk without coworkers around. We'd sit in the deserted break room, the fluorescent lights humming above us, and I'd tell him things I hadn't told anyone in years. My dreams of traveling to Italy, a dream that had slowly faded into a stack of unread travel books on my nightstand. How I sometimes felt invisible in my own home. How I wondered if this quiet, predictable life was all there was for me. He'd share, too. He told me about his failed marriage, how his ex-wife was cold and controlling. He talked about his hopes of starting over, how he'd never met someone he connected with like me. He made me feel like I was special, unique. The first time he kissed me was after a university happy hour. We'd both had a couple of glasses of wine, and he walked me to my car in the darkening parking lot. The air was cool. My heart was hammering in my chest. I knew I should pull away. I knew I should say no, but I didn't want to. That kiss, it made me feel 20 years younger. It was thrilling and terrifying and wonderful all at once. I drove home in a daze, my lips still tingling. When I walked through the front door, the house was quiet. David was asleep on the couch, his mouth slightly open, the television still flickering with the late-night news. I stood there, just looking at him, and I thought about how Leo made me feel, versus the profound emptiness I felt looking at my husband of 25 years. That night, I slept in the guest room. I claimed I didn't want to wake him. It was the first of many lies. Our emotional affair turned physical a few weeks later. I told David I was attending a work conference for the weekend, but I was really in a hotel downtown. With Leo, I should have felt guilty. I should have been consumed by shame, but all I felt was relief, like I could finally breathe again after being underwater for a decade. Leo looked at me like I was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. He couldn't keep his hands off me. He wanted to know everything about me. With him, I wasn't just somebody's wife. I wasn't just somebody's mom. I was Alice again. I started comparing everything. Every single thing David did, or didn't do, to Leo. David's steady, predictable nature, which had once made me feel secure, now just seemed boring, passionless. His practical approach to everything felt stifling. Leo was spontaneous, romantic. He made me feel like I was the center of his universe. I convinced myself that what Leo and I had was real love, the kind people write songs about, and what David and I had was just a comfortable habit, a contract. After 2 months of sneaking around, of living a double life, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided I deserved to be happy. Why should I settle for a lukewarm marriage when I could have passionate, all-consuming love? So I did it. I did the thing I never imagined I would do. I sat David down in our quiet living room, surrounded by the ghosts of our shared life, and I told him I wanted a divorce. The look on his face still haunts me sometimes. In my quietest moments, it wasn't anger, not at first. It was just the blank confusion, like I had suddenly started speaking a foreign language. When I told him I wanted out, he didn't even yell. He just sat there, his hands resting on his knees, and asked, quietly, "Is there someone else?" I tried to be gentle, I really did. But I told him yes. I told him I'd met someone who made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. He asked me if I would reconsider, if we could try marriage counseling. He talked about our family, our history, the 25 years we'd built together. But my mind was made up. The life he was talking about felt like a cage I was desperate to escape. "I'm not in love with you anymore, David," I said. The words felt cruel, even as they left my mouth. "I haven't been for a long time." That part, that part wasn't completely true. But I needed to say something definitive. Something that would make it easier to leave. Something that would cauterize the wound so I couldn't turn back. Things got ugly after that. A weekend came when I just disappeared. From Friday evening until Sunday night, I was with Leo. I told myself I deserved that little getaway after all the stress. But when I came home to pack more of my clothes, David completely lost it. The blank confusion was gone, replaced by a deep, cold rage I had never seen before. "Don't come back," he said, his voice dangerously low. "You can get your things another time. But this house, it isn't your home anymore." I was shocked. After 25 years together, he was just throwing me out? But honestly, in a strange way, it made things easier. It took the decision out of my hands. I moved in with Leo that same day. I tried to keep things civil during the divorce proceedings. I just wanted it done, quickly, so Leo and I could finally start our new life together, out in the open. So, I agreed to pretty much everything David's lawyer wanted. He kept the house I had decorated, the garden I had tended. He kept his entire pension. He kept most of his 401k. My friends, the few who were still speaking to me, told me I was being stupid. They said I deserved half of everything after 25 years as a wife and mother. But I didn't care about the money then. Leo made good money. We were in love. Material things seemed so unimportant compared to finally being happy. The kids, however, were another story. I wasn't prepared for how they would react. Jacob, my oldest, my steady, serious son, told me on the phone that he was done with me if I chose this guy over his dad. He actually used those words, like Leo was some random nobody. Emily just cried. She asked me how I could break up our family, how I could do this to Dad. Even Sam, who's always been my easygoing one, shut me out. His texts became one-word answers. I tried to explain. I told them that sometimes people grow apart, that I deserved happiness too, but they weren't hearing it. They had only ever seen me as their mom, not as a woman with her own needs and desires. I figured they'd come around. Eventually. Once they saw how happy Leo made me, they would have to understand. The divorce was finalized in the early spring of 2022, and for a while, everything with Leo was amazing. It was everything I had dreamed it would be. We took weekend trips to the coast. We went out dancing. We stayed up late talking about everything and nothing. The sex was incredible, passionate and frequent, in a way it hadn't been with David in more than a decade. Leo would surprise me with flowers for no reason. We'd take spontaneous days off work just to be together. He made me feel young again, desirable. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living, instead of just existing. I had made the right choice. I was sure of it. I had finally chosen happiness. Who could possibly fault me for that? You can live in a dream for a while, but eventually, you have to wake up. Around 4 months after the divorce was finalized, reality started creeping in. Quietly at first, then all at once. The first red flag was Leo's drinking. During our affair, I'd only ever seen him have a few social drinks. A glass of wine at dinner, a beer at a happy hour. Now that we were living together, I realized he drank every single night, sometimes starting as soon as he got home from work. A whiskey, then another, then a few beers. When I mentioned it, gently, he'd get defensive. "I work hard, Alice. I deserve to relax." The second issue was money. Leo was generous to a fault. He was always buying rounds for his friends at the bar, ordering expensive electronics we didn't need, taking me to fancy restaurants multiple times a week. At first, it was thrilling, but I started worrying about our finances. I was the one with the nest egg from the divorce, meager as it was, and it was dwindling fast. When I brought it up, he accused me of being uptight. "Don't be like David," he said once, and the words felt like a slap. The breaking point came when I was checking my credit card statement online. I saw a $2,000 charge for a golf club membership. I hadn't authorized it. I confronted him. He exploded. He yelled that I was trying to control him, just like his ex-wife had, that I didn't trust him. That night, he didn't come home until 3 in the morning. He stumbled through the door, drunk and unapologetic, and collapsed onto our bed, still wearing his clothes. As I watched him lie there, snoring, I felt the first real, cold shard of doubt pierce through my romantic fantasy. This wasn't what I had pictured when I'd blown up my life for him. Meanwhile, I was getting increasingly desperate about my relationship with my kids. Jacob wouldn't take my calls at all. Emily would talk to me, occasionally, but our conversations were always strained and ended with her sounding upset. She told me Dad was healing, and that everyone was worried about me. And I hated that. The idea that I was someone to be worried about, like I'd lost my mind. Sam would respond to my texts, but that was it, if at all. I missed them so much it felt like a physical ache. But I still believed, I clung to the belief, that they would eventually accept Leo and my new life. Then, David completely blindsided me, 6 months after our divorce. 6 months. Emily let it slip during one of our tense phone calls. He was dating someone, some friend of his sister's, also divorced. I was shocked. And if I'm being completely honest with myself, I was jealous. Viciously jealous. How could he move on so quickly? We had been together for 25 years. Didn't that mean anything? I tried to tell myself I didn't care. After all, I had Leo, the passionate love of my life. But it bothered me, more than it should have. I kept picturing this other woman in my house, using my kitchen, sleeping in what used to be my bed. The real blow came a few months later. Jacob got engaged. And I found out through a post on Facebook, not even a phone call. My hands were shaking as I called to congratulate him. His voice was cold, distant. He told me, bluntly, that I wasn't invited to the wedding. I was devastated, utterly broken. In a panic, I called David. I was sobbing, begging him to talk to our son, to make him understand that I was still his mother. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then he said, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion, "This is between you and Jacob. You made your choice, Alice." Then he hung up. I cried for days. Leo had little sympathy. He said my kids were adults, that they were being manipulated by their father, and that I should just give them time. He didn't comfort me. He just opened another beer. That's when things really started falling apart. The fantasy wasn't just cracking anymore, it was shattering. The next year was a blur of decline, a slow, grinding descent into a life I didn't recognize. Leo's drinking got worse. Much worse. He totaled my car, wrapping it around a telephone pole after driving home drunk from a golf outing with his buddies. I was lucky he wasn't killed, or that he didn't kill someone else. Then I discovered he'd been dipping into the money from my 401k, the small sum I'd managed to get from the divorce. He'd been using it to cover his own credit card debt. When I confronted him, he cried. He promised to pay me back. He swore he'd cut back on the drinking, that he'd get help. And I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. Because the alternative of admitting that I had made a catastrophic, life-ruining mistake, was too painful to face. But promises don't mean much from someone who can't even remember making them the next morning. Leo's behavior became more and more erratic. He'd be loving and charming 1 minute, and cruel and dismissive the next. My dream man was turning into a nightmare, and I had nowhere to turn. My friends from my married life had mostly sided with David. I couldn't blame them. My kids barely spoke to me. I was working extra hours at the university just to cover our expenses, since Leo had been between jobs for 3 months after getting fired for poor performance. One night, after Leo had passed out on the couch again, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the floor beside him, I went into our small apartment bathroom and just stared at myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. Her eyes were hollow. There were new lines of stress around her mouth. She looked tired. She looked defeated. And in the sterile silence of that bathroom, I finally admitted the truth to myself. The raw, brutal, unforgiving truth. I had destroyed everything good in my life. For a fantasy. The passionate, attentive man I had fallen for didn't really exist. Or maybe he did, but only for as long as it took to lure me away from my family. Either way, I was trapped in a relationship with an alcoholic who was bleeding me dry, financially and emotionally. In a moment of pure, unadulterated desperation, I called David. It had been over a year since the divorce. I thought maybe time had softened his anger. I told him everything. I told him I'd made a terrible mistake. My voice was trembling. I asked him if I could come home. The silence on the other end of the line should have prepared me for what came next. But it didn't. David unleashed 25 years of built-up rage and hurt. He told me exactly what he thought of me. as a person, as a wife, as a mother. He told me I had broken him, and that he had spent the last year putting himself back together, piece by piece. He said the house was no longer my home and never would be again. He told me his new partner, Diane, was a kind and honest woman, everything I was not. And then he said, "Never contact me again, Alice." And he hung up. The final door had not just been closed, it had been bolted, locked, and barricaded. I stayed with Leo for another 6 months after that call. I was paralyzed. Paralyzed by shame, by the crushing fear of being utterly and completely alone. But when I discovered he had spent the last of my savings on a gambling trip to Reno with his friends, something inside me finally snapped. The paralysis broke. I packed my things while he was out. 2 suitcases. That's all I had left to show for my life. I left the key on the counter and walked out. I didn't even leave a note. There was nothing left to say. Now, I live here. In this dingy 1-bedroom apartment, I drive a used car that breaks down weekly. I'm still at the university, but I had to take on a second, part-time job doing data entry on weekends just to make rent. My life has become unrecognizable. Last week, Emily told me that Jacob and his wife are expecting a baby, a boy. I should be excited about becoming a grandmother, but all I feel is a profound, bottomless grief. The grief of knowing I probably won't be allowed to meet my own grandchild. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that David and Diane are planning a trip to Hawaii this summer. The trip he and I had always talked about taking, once Sam finished college. Some days, I tell myself it's not fair. That one mistake, even a huge one, shouldn't cost a person everything. That my kids should forgive me, because I'm their mother. That David should have fought harder for our marriage. But in my honest moments, usually late at night when the city is quiet and I can't sleep, I know the truth. I didn't just make a mistake. I made a choice. Over and over again, day after day. For months, I chose excitement over commitment. I chose fantasy over reality. I chose selfishness over family. And now, I am living with the consequences. Maybe someday my kids will forgive me. Maybe someday, I'll be able to forgive myself. But for now, all I can do is wake up each day in this empty apartment, go to my meaningless jobs, and wonder how I could have been so stupid. How I could have thrown away 25 years of love for something that turned out to be nothing but smoke and mirrors. Last month, I ran into David at the grocery store, 3 years after our divorce, and my heart still did a painful little jump when I saw him. He looked good, better than I remembered. He'd lost weight. He had a new, more stylish haircut. He was with her, Diane. They were laughing about something in the cereal aisle. The moment he saw me, his face changed. It wasn't anger anymore. It was nothing. Just a blank, polite disinterest. Like I was a stranger. He vaguely recognized from somewhere. He gave me a curt nod, and then he gently guided Diane in the other direction, down the next aisle. She glanced back at me with curiosity. I wonder what he's told her about me. Probably everything. Probably the truth. Emily's wedding is next month. She invited me, which feels like more than I deserve. She made it clear, though. The conditions. I'll be seated separately from the family table. I shouldn't bring a date. I shouldn't expect to be in many of the official photos. I agreed to all her terms immediately. I'd stand in the parking lot and watch through a window if that's what it took to see my daughter get married. Jacob won't talk to me at the wedding, she warned, and I'll only see Sam at the reception for a few minutes. David will be there with Diane. I'll be alone. It's going to be awkward and painful and probably humiliating. But I'll be there, with a smile plastered on my face. Because what other choice do I have? My mother used to say, "The grass is greener where you water it." I never understood that until it was too late. I was so sure the problem was the grass itself. The problem was David, our marriage, our life. I convinced myself that Leo was the solution when he was really just an escape. I didn't water my own grass. I jumped the fence for someone else's, only to discover it was just dead weeds painted green. Leo texted me last week. He said he misses me, that he's finally getting help for his drinking, that he wants me back. I deleted the message without responding. Some lessons you only need to learn once. But it got me thinking about second chances. David got one, with Diane. My kids are building their own lives. Even Leo thinks he deserves another shot. What about me? Do I get a second chance? Or is this it? This small life in this small apartment, paying for my mistakes until the day I die. When I see my therapist, yes. I finally started seeing one. She talks a lot about forgiveness. Forgiving David, forgiving Leo, forgiving myself. The first two feel possible, eventually. The last one, the last one feels impossible. How do you forgive yourself for ruining your own life? For hurting the people you were supposed to protect? For throwing away something precious for something utterly worthless? She says it starts with accepting that you're human. That humans make terrible, awful mistakes. That making a bad choice doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. I'm not there yet. Emily said the baby is due in October. A little boy. My first grandchild. She hasn't said whether I'll be allowed to meet him. I've started knitting a blanket. Just in case. It's a soft yarn, blue and white. The kind that won't irritate a newborn's skin. I'm not very good at it. I tangle the yarn at least once every session. I have to undo whole rows because I've miscounted the stitches. But I keep going. It feels important. Somehow. To make something with my hands for this new life that's coming into the world. Even if I never get to give it to him. My therapist would probably call it a hope project. She'd be right. All I know for sure is that if I could go back, I would do everything differently. Not just because I ended up alone and broke, though that's certainly part of it, but because I finally understand what I took for granted. What I saw as a boring, predictable life was actually a foundation. It was safety, stability, trust. It was the steady accumulation of memories and inside jokes, and small, quiet kindnesses. It was the knowledge that someone would always be there, not because you made their heart race with illicit excitement, but because they had chosen you, day after day, year after year. That's the real love story. Not Leo and his empty, fleeting passion. The real love was there all along, and I was too blind and too stupid to see it.